How does shares, equity, and dilution actually work? If you want to close your round, you have to understand the finer details of raising investment. Fundraising is hard. If it were easy, then there'd be more than 1% of founders successfully closing deals. The fact is, there's lots of things you need to know as a founder seeking investment, and very few founders understand how it all works. The trouble is, we're not taught this stuff in school. In fact, even MBAs don't focus much time on the details of equity investment. For a founder, it can feel like you're thrown in at the deep end and are struggling to navigate your way through the process. Something that often comes up for first-time founders is how shares, equity, and dilution actually works. Put simply, shares are units of equity. Every limited company has shares, and it's these shares that are bought by investors. The more shares they own, the more equity they control. For example, if a company has 100 shares and you own all 100 of them, you have 100% of the company equity. If you own 50 of them and an investor owns the other 50, then you each own 50% of the company. When selling equity in their company, most founders imagine a transaction taking place where they take some of their shares and they transfer them to an investor in return for cash. For instance, in this example, where the company has 100 shares, of which you own all of them, you might imagine that if an investor were to invest 15% equity, you'd simply sell them 15 of your 100 shares. They'd now own 15%, and you would own 85% of the total 100 shares. However, in practice, what happens is that the company creates more shares to sell to the investor. So in this example, you would actually create 18 new shares and sell these to an investor, retaining your original 100 shares. The investor now owns 18 of the now 118 shares in the company, which is equal to 15%. If we now fast forward to our second round of fundraising, we can start to explore the second area founders struggle with when it comes to shares, equity, and fundraising, and that's dilution. Dilution is the effect of your total equity in a company getting smaller each time new shares are issued. This happens with every funding round you do. So just like the previous example, where your total shareholding remained at 100 shares, while your equity reduced to 85%, so too will your first investor's shares be diluted if you do a second round of investment. If we continue the example and assume another round of funding is achieved, and this time you agree with the investor they will receive 20% equity in the business for all that investment, then you would need to create a further 29 shares. You would own 100, investor 1 would own 18, and investor 2 would own 29 out of the new total of 147 shares. Investor 2's equity is 20%, but what's happened to investor 1? Their share of the company has gotten smaller. They still have 18 shares, but 18 out of a new total of 147 shares is 12%. So after your second round, investor 1 has gone from owning 15% of the business to owning just 12%. You, on the other hand, have gone from owning 100%, then 85%, to now owning 68%. This is what investors are concerned about when they talk about dilution. They know that for every round of investment you do, their overall share of the company will get smaller. This isn't necessarily an issue if the new investment means the company is able to increase its value and sell for a larger sum of money, as they'll have a smaller share of a larger value. For example, 15% of 1 million is 150k. While 12% of 10 million is 1.2 million. So while this is a hypothetical example, you can begin to see why talking shares, equity, and dilution can be a really big deal for investors, and why they might expect you to understand how many rounds of investment you're planning, who currently owns your shares, and how much equity you might be planning to sell in the future. These details can have a massive impact on the potential returns of their investment. So many investors will want to understand your longer term plans, or at the very least, see that you're aware of the fact that raising more money in the future will have an impact on their own shareholding.